You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's 50th anniversary rewatch of Star Trek, in which we look at all 729 episodes from beginning to end. I'm Mike from Stage 9.
And I am Brandon from Melodic Treks.
And today we're going to be talking about 2 episodes of Voyager, Day of Honor, and Nemesis.
Mike, this is actually a Voyager episode and a Next Generation movie.
Yes, it is. Yes. It stars Tom Hardy, but you can't recognize him because he's, Tom Hardy. I mean, do you ever recognize Tom Hardy? He always looks different.
I could understand him in this. I mean, I didn't understand him when he played Bane.
Yeah. The fire is rising or something. I don't know. Whatever. All right. So let's start off with Day of Honor, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
This is an episode where it's the Day of Honor. It's a Klingon thing.
We've heard of it before, haven't we?
Probably. And, Paris is like, hey, B'Elanna, you should totally do this thing. And she's like, I know, but I don't wanna. But then she ends up going through her own sort of trials of Days of Honor when an alien race which has been decimated by the Borg tries to get supplies or whatever from Voyager and essentially takes things a little too far and ends up stealing Voyager's warp core, and B'Elanna and Tom end up floating around in space without a spaceship. They did it before. It's like Gravity, but in the Delta Quadrant.
They're up Space Creek without a shuttle.
Yes. Voyager did it first. And also, this is, Gravity completely, mastering this sort of concept. And I love how, one of the things which they do to show weightlessness is, B'Elanna's pretty good at it, right? But Tom, he tends to talk at a slightly slower speed because that's what happens when you don't have gravity at play. You can't move your mouth as quickly.
It's kind of like when people meet somebody that doesn't speak their language, they just raise their voice and yell at them. Yeah, because that generally works, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I don't mind this episode. I mean, it's not great. I mean, we've got this Klingon concept that we've never heard of before. They've never mentioned it. So we've got no reference for it. We had a Klingon for 7 years on the Next Generation, and at this point, he'd been on Voyager or on Deep Space Nine for another 2 seasons already at this point, and we've never heard mention of this Day of Honor thing, and it's just out of nowhere we've got it.
Yeah, but I mean, is that really so weird?
Yes.
Because in, 7 seasons of Next Generation, how often did you hear them talking about Columbus Day?
But no, we didn't have an episode of Star Trek that just suddenly celebrated Columbus Day.
Right, I know, but what I'm saying is, you're but if we did, if all of a sudden they were this is the Columbus Day episode.
Yeah, but Voyager. This is Worf we're talking about. Worf celebrated everything Klingon.
And I'm sure he did, but that doesn't mean we have to see it. We only get 26 episodes a year. There's 365 days a year. So we just never landed on the Day of Honor,
Okay.
I'm just saying. Whatever. I like this episode quite a bit because I think, it's cool how they're sort of able to deal with this Klingon concept without going full Klingon, because I kind of don't like it when they go full Klingon. And when she first steps foot onto the holodeck, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be really long. And then she's like, I'm out of here. And then they deal with those themes and everything, but they deal with them through, the other story. And you're still dealing with this brand new character, 7 of 9, and trying to introduce her into this crew. And you're able to sort of do that while still giving another member of the crew, in this case B'Elanna, center stage. And this alien race that they meet, I think, is really interesting because the way that they present them at first, you really feel bad for them. And they're so gracious of anything that they can get, and they're like, you don't know what this means to us. And what, Voyager is giving them is rather small in the grand scheme of things. But then they just take it too far, and at some point you're just like, oh, these people, they're jerks, I feel bad for them because of what, the Borg did to them, but that doesn't make them any less jerks,
See, my impression of this alien race is that they did this repeatedly. Like, they played this passive card, this hurt card, numerous times to gauge who they were dealing with. And then they would take a few things from them, they would leave and come back and steal more. Like, I got the impression that this was something that they did repeatedly.
That could be. I don't know. It's interesting, either way, could be accurate, and then also the way that you see them interacting with Seven is really interesting, and all that stuff. I don't know. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in here. This is also the episode where, this is kind of, whatever, but, when they're dying, B'Elanna is like, I love you. And Tom Paris is like, okay, cool. And like that, I don't quite buy. I never but it's like you're going from 0 to 60. Really, it's like I don't, not willing to admit that. I think you're attractive. To I love you. That's not quite how it works. It's like
She's gonna die.
That's fine, but does she really love him? I'm thinking probably not. Even if like you have a huge crush on someone and you're not willing to admit it, does that mean that you love them? I don't think that's how it works. I could see like a teenager saying that because that's how they do think it works, but I don't think that's how it works. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. She could be like, I really wish that I had admitted that I have feelings for you, but I guess that doesn't have quite the same ring to it. And when they're beamed up at the end, and then it's like executive producers Rick Berman and Jerry Taylor.
Like just done.
That's a little, I like the, sort of, I think it's, Roger Corman philosophy of like once you kill the monster, then the movie is over. And maybe it's not Roger Corman. I forget who it is. Whoever said it is right. But at the same time, that's just a little too cheesy, a little too, I'm surprised when they beamed out, they didn't leave like the trail of like a heart, just behind them or whatever. It's just a little whatever. But
I think it was Indiana Jones that said that.
Yeah, yes, I'm sure it was.
See,
yes.
I don't know. I never bought B'Elanna and Tom relationship. I never bought it. I don't know. Like, I'm like the only person who I think on the planet who didn't buy that relationship at all.
I can see it. And the thing that I kind of loved, more than like any other relationship on Voyager, I ship them, is I think that's the term. Yeah. I don't know. And for me, it's not so much anything to do with the characters. It's just the fact that like both Robert Duncan McNeil and Roxanne Dawson started directing episodes on this show, and they're the two that broke out and became like really freaking good directors, right? And I love the idea of like they put the two directors together, like, when they get together they're going to make beautiful television episodes. I don't know, I just love that.
The only relationship I ever shipped in Star Trek was Tripp and T'Pol. That was the only one.
I know. Dax and Worf is the big one. That's the...
Well, yeah, okay, yeah, Dax and Worf too. That's good. So, anywho, should we move on to Nemesis?
Yeah. This is a weird episode because it doesn't work until the end. And then when you get to the end, you're like, oh, I wish they would have made the first 40 minutes of this episode interesting because the ending is killer. Nemesis. Okay, this is the one where Chakotay is on a planet and he gets picked up by he he gets picked up by some human-looking people who are apparently they've been living on the Predator homeworld, and they're fighting the Predators, who are very, very vicious, as we've seen in Predator, Predator 2, Alien versus Predator, and Aliens versus Predator Requiem and Predators. And they are like, come on, Chakotay, you need to help us fight them because they're evil and they're bad and they're going to kill us. And he's like, yeah. And then there's a twist, which I won't reveal just in case anyone hasn't seen it.
Okay, well, I'm going to reveal the ending. So,
Okay.
I feel exactly the opposite of you.
Okay.
I think that I didn't like how the episode ended, and I think that the first 40-some minutes of this episode were amazing. This is one of my favorite episodes of Voyager. I absolutely love this episode, and I think it's extremely fascinating. The first time I watched this episode, I don't know, everybody tells me they saw it coming. I did not see the twist in the middle of the episode coming, where the people that Chakotay was with were not the people that Janeway was trying to make peace with. I did not see that twist coming at all. And so that totally blew me away the first time I watched this episode. And I was recently talking about this, and I don't know if it was the Babel Conference or another site. It might have been the one for Trek Geeks, the Kiddemer one. But somebody had mentioned this episode, and I said that I think the episode would have been better when it ended if it wasn't brainwashing Chakotay, if he actually would have gone through those experiences. And I think the episode would have been better had that happened. And somebody else piped up and said, no, it's an episode about the power of brainwashing. And it's like, yes, I understand brainwashing is a powerful subject, but we've already done that with Chain of Command. We have never done an episode where our heroes and our people who are on the same team end up on opposite teams at the end. And I think it would have been fascinating because war is a dirty business. And I do not buy for an instant that either side is all bad. And there are shades of gray, and it deals a lot with... I live in Regina, Saskatchewan, and we have a football team, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and people are insane for Riders. I do not like football at all, but they are insane for Riders fans. But it's like, if you're in Winnipeg, you're insane for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers because that's where you're born and raised. That's what everybody likes. You live in Chicago. I'm sure you're a Cubs fan because you're born in Chicago. And like 99% of the time, that's true, right? But Chakotay is now getting a completely different experience by serving with these people on the planet, and Janeway's getting a completely different experience by dealing with different people. And I think it would be more fascinating at the end had what Chakotay been going through actually been what Chakotay went through.
You are just a monster. You're like those Predator things. Like, you're from Chicago. I'm sure you're a Cubs fan. Oh my God. Ah.
Are they? I'm from Canada. Are there the Chicago Cubs?
Yes, there are the Chicago Cubs.
Okay, I don't even watch. I don't watch sports.
Okay, there are the Chicago Cubs, and there are also the Chicago White Sox. I'm wearing a freaking White Sox hat. How dare you, sir? How dare you slander my good name by calling me a Cubs fan? Oh my God!
You have two baseball teams in one city?
I don't even know what we were talking about anymore because all I heard was, "You are a Cubs fan." What were we talking about? Nemesis.
Something like that. Anyways, I don't know.
Whatever. I had a point that I was going to make, but I guess the point that I'm going to make now is like, what? No, like, okay, I saw the twist coming in terms of like, oh yeah, it's you know, they're talking about the other race, you know, but I did not see like the brainwashing twist come in. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I agree with you on that, but I guess what my thinking is like everything leading up to that point, to the, they're talking to the other people, was super boring. You know, and then when you get to the twist, I sort of agree with you that I think it would be better if it was just like, there are different perspectives and, you know, whatever. And for it to be just like, these guys are the evil ones is a little weak. But at the same time, I can kind of like forgive it because it's an interesting enough idea. But it's a long road getting from there to here. And I just completely lose interest way before we get to the idea of the twist.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people don't like this episode, and I don't know, I'm just bonkers. I really love this episode. Like, Nemesis is one of my top 10 Voyager episodes. I really like this episode a lot.
Yeah.
So, and
I've always been much more of an Alien fan than a Predator fan, so
me too.
You know,
yes,
it's
I definitely
kinda,
prefer the Alien movies.
I prefer Macrocosm to Nemesis any day of the week.
One thing I want to point out is I don't have the guy's name. I didn't write it down here. But the star of the bad guys that Chakotay's with the black hair, he's a Canadian actor, and I know him because when I was a kid, he was on a show that I used to watch because we only had CBC, like we only got Channel 13 over the air for free up in Pine House Lake where I lived, and he was on Road to Avonlea. So he's a Canadian actor.
Cool.
Yes.
Canada.
Yeehaw! Right on. Well, that's about all I got to say.
Yeah, me too. Voyager. This is the first time, I will say, Nemesis is the first time where I think Voyager starts to lose momentum in Season 4 because it's not 7-centric, and it feels like kind of a detour because I'm so interested in this new character that they've set up that I kind of don't want to stop for anything else. And I know you naturally have to because you've got, a large cast which you need to service, but I kind of wish, they could just keep the 7 train going, you know what I mean?
So I got a big question here. So do the Chicago Cubs play against the Chicago White Sox?
Yes, they do.
So you have 2 baseball teams in one city?
We have two baseball teams, yes.
That's crazy.
Yes, we have 2 baseball teams in one city. One of them is the Chicago White Sox. The other is the Chicago Cubs. And I know right now everyone's going to be like, you are such a loser because the Cubs are probably knee-deep in the playoffs as this thing is airing. They're probably well on their way to the World Series for the first time in 109 years or something like that. And, at least a victory. And, I don't hate the Cubs. I really don't hate the Cubs. I could not care less about the Cubs. The Cubs are completely dead to me. I'm a White Sox fan, and I have much more hatred for the teams in the White Sox division, like the Tigers and the Royals and the Twins and the Indians, and I don't have time to dislike the Cubs because I'm not petty like that just because they're my neighbors and because whatever, they're completely insignificant to me, and I wish them all the best in the postseason. And I just hope that they're not playing on a day where I have to go to the Music Box, which is right down the street from Wrigley Field.
Give me some credit here. I watch way more movies than I watch sports, like way more. And don't you know that history's really messed up when the Cubs win the World Series? Like, isn't that the standard for a really bad time? Like England leaves the EU and the Cubs winning the World Series. You know that like crap's gone really bad in the timeline.
Yeah, it's like the end times are near or something. Yeah. I will say, because there's that whole thing in Back to the Future 2 where it's like, the Cubs, the joke is like against Miami when there wasn't a Miami team at that point in time. And the guy's like, yeah, who would have guessed that the Cubs, would have won the World Series? And, on that day in, actual real world time in 2015, they obviously did a Back to the Future trilogy marathon at various places. And the Cubs were in the playoffs. The Cubs came very close to getting to that point, and they were playing an elimination game on that day. So I went to see the Back to the Future trilogy, went to see Back to the Future Part 2, where that line comes up, everyone in the theater is like, yeah, right? And then the movie ends, we leave the theater, we all check our phones to find that while we were watching the movie, the Cubs were eliminated from the playoffs, and history did not, play out
predicted.
the way Back to the Future 2 predicted. Oh, well. What can you do?
Well, Mike, where can people find you when you're not front row and centered watching your favorite team, the Chicago Cubs, play baseball?
You can find me right here on Stage 9 talking about the people who make Star Trek, and you can also find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K.
And you can find me here on the network with new episodes of Melodic Treks, as well as on Twitter at Brandon-Mutala. And Mike will not be here tomorrow, but I will be here with Ken Tripp, and we will be talking about that 6-part arc at the beginning of Deep Space Nine.